So she didn't inherit Grandpa's jawline, but there's no doubt she's family. It's your job to raise her, and it can be tough. Let's make it easier. With technology and automation, you can do more, like produce high-quality bales with way less effort. Built-in sensors can measure bale moisture and size, so you can monitor quality on the go and manage your fleet from your phone. Sit back and enjoy effortless operation. Discover an easier way to work.
Welcome back to another edition of Cattle Chatter. I'm Susan Littlefield with the American Ag Network, of course, being powered by John Deere. Turn your hay or silage into consistent, dense bales with John Deere round balers. Precision features integrated technology and dependable performance that you can count on. We are at World Dairy Expo, and what a better place to do cattle chatter than with that amazing round baler that is behind us right now. Definitely use it on my farm. If I turn the screen, you can see an outstanding chopper too that'll just make life that much easier for our cattle guys. Brad Kooima joins us today, another volatility week, and I feel like it's almost like a Groundhog's Day, Brad, as we look at this. You are, of course, with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa, and a repeat volatility. I mean, we've been spoiled up until the last couple of weeks.
Excellent line. Thanks for having me on, Susan.
Yeah.
Groundhog Day. That's usually my job to make those, good job.
Thanks.
I like that. I might steal that. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah. The market, these large swings back and forth. I remember when I was first cutting my teeth here and reading a lot of technical books and, stuff, analytical stuff like that. And I remember one of those signals that you had to watch for was when you had these big swings in the market. And I kind of smile because I started in 1980. Big swings back then was if the cattle had $1 trading range. Now we have $3, $4, $5, $7, $8, $9 trading ranges in feeder cattle. But that was a sign of either a bottom or a top. And I still think there's some merit to that whenever you get all this. Back in the good old days when we had a pit, I used to use a phrase a lot of exchange of ownership. Now we can't tell because it's not transparent anymore because of all the computer trade. But, if you would, if the funds all decide to take some money and it's replaced by people like me, or a small trader, public, that would always be a sign that that might not be a great idea, right? So volatility is like Groundhog Day for sure. I thought that yesterday. It's a good thing we didn't do this program at 8 o'clock because I was pretty off base. I thought that the news that Dectomax was approved by the FDA for treatment of screwworm. I thought that would be the dominant news item of the day. Providing another pathway for how are we gonna strategically reopen the Mexican border. And we did open lower, but then came screaming back, and I'm not exactly sure why. The market's the market, right, at the end of the day, but then only to fail again at the end of the day. And now today, feeder cattle really never saw much light at the end of the tunnel all day today. And feeder cattle have been the leaders. You and I have talked about this weeks and weeks and weeks, right? Weak trade today on the feeder cattle, and I think that some of it is, some of it's cash feeders too, okay? Like Oak City yesterday was called their market 10 to 20 lower. Now I watched some of these northern sales today. I wouldn't say that they're anything like that today around the north, but they're softer, so yeah, whippy, very whippy for sure.
Well, you talk about those headline grabbers, and when I saw that news release come out from one of the companies that said, hey, we've got the preliminary approval, I thought, okay, here we go. Let's bring the excitement back to this trade, and we're still sitting, even though, as you talked about headlines of NCBA's version in Mexico, and saying, hey, we're going to get this border opened sooner than later. But again, it's going to be a wait and see.
Right. And it's good for you to bring that up because I should have thought of that. Of doing that. Basically, the equivalent of whatever they call the NCBA in Mexico. That president said this morning that, in a statement that he expects the border to open in November, which we all kind of looked at each other. Yeah, went, yeah, right. I think the U.S. is going to decide when the border reopens. But again, those, I think that there's algos that trade off of headlines myself, but that didn't help the tone of the market at all to start the day out, Susan. So that's part of it. Now, in my opinion, it's not whether the border is going to open; it's when. That's my feeling. So whether it's cold weather or whether they figure enough science out to figure out a way to safely vaccinate or treat, or anything coming across. So, to me, if you're a long-term thinker here, you have to be thinking longer term a little bit here, that the borders are going to remain closed forever.
So how tight are we looking at cattle in Texas? We talked about that a little bit last week during the episode of Cattle Chatter, but obviously it continues to tighten up.
Well, at the risk of being too personal here, I've sold personally. Well, my brother sells my cattle, but the cattle that I own, that I sold on Friday here in Northwest Iowa, went Monday to a spot in Texas to be slaughtered. That's a lot of freight, and that's a deal where the packer pays the freight. The cattle up here are sold, picked up, weighed on the near scale with a 3%. And then the packer pays the freight. So I don't know, $6-7 worth of freight to get them down there. I don't think a packer would do that unless the situation is extreme. And I think the situation for tightness in Texas is just that, very extreme. There've been multiple kill cuts, packers taking their turn, with any kind of repair job that they can think of, just so that they don't have to. And there's a big repair job going on at one of the plants in Colorado, going to be down for 8 days doing a repair. Yeah. So it's serious. And so I think you started me down a path here where I think it's the story of the market. I think the North has got a few cattle, and not like, oh my goodness, it's horrible, like it was in 2015 or something like that. No, not like that. But we're nowhere near where we were in spring and summer, when you and I talked over and over about leverage, and we were pulled a month ahead. We were selling the April cattle in March, and we sold the June cattle in May. And remember we talked about that pulling forward. We're not there anymore now. It's not. I don't mean to make it sound worse than it is, but there's a few big cattle standing around. However, if the South, if we're going to fund the South, if we're going to supply the South, this won't take as long to clean up as it would have otherwise. So I'm of the view that it's going to take just a little bit. It probably would take. We might have to peel October off the calendar. Maybe it takes closer into that Thanksgiving, which wouldn't be the first time. That things make a low someplace around that time period. So I'm, once again, not as fun. Like we talked about last week. It's like me better when I'm bullish, but I'm going to be a little bit standoffish and careful here for a little bit here yet, Susan.
You and I think every other cattle guy right now. I mean, obviously seeing around $5 lower in Nebraska. The lower bids. I think there's the hope that next week we can kind of start to creep back up into that positive territory again.
I have a saying around here, and when it turns to hope, you're in trouble, right? and I'm trying to be funny, but
I know.
Yeah, I think that speaks to that leverage piece, where before, if we didn't like the bid, cattle ain't fat anyway, we're gonna wait. Now it's like, well, yeah, like kind of, it's like, anyway. But 230, it's not a wreck.
No,
I'm bid 230, and remember how good 230 sounded the first time we went there on the way up. So I'm of the view, stay current, and I know feeder cattle are high, and I know all that, but cattle still work really good at 230, and my opinion would be it'll last longer if we stay current.
So give me your thoughts and takeaway of the government shutdown and how that's going to weigh in on the cattle market, or is it?
Well, a couple of times I've made statements at these large organizations that I'm part of, when they're all worried about government shutdowns and what do we do if we don't get like NPR and or LMR, and we won't know what the cash market is and stuff, and this could be get me in trouble. Because if you don't know what the cash market is, you can call me. I know. Yeah. I'm not the only one. There's plenty of us that know what the cash market is. Yeah. You can get rid of it altogether for me, because all these formulas are driven off these base cash prices plus their formula, which is a top secret deal, right? Until we got the formula library, which is still not granular enough to tell us really what's going on there. I'm on my soapbox, but it's better than it was. But I should answer you seriously. I think the market, I'm watching, one of the screens I have up here all the time is the S&P futures, which is this, futures instrument for one of the stock indexes. So the market doesn't seem to care the market seems to think that either this is not a big deal or it's going to be very short-lived, I guess would be the thing. Now, so if this turns into some more of a bigger deal, some of the economic news this morning was no runaway. This employment report was way different than they thought it was going to be, which oddly enough made the stock market rally a little bit, because thought, well, if the economy is going to slow down, then we'll lower rates, which was everyone wants the rates to go down. That seems to be where the focus is now. I don't think that the government shutdown's a big deal unless it turns into something bigger than it is. But I think right now I think the odds are we'll be done in 2 weeks or something like that. That's what I read. So hopefully it doesn't create anything funny.
All right. Looking forward to see what next week brings. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
You can look at kkbtrading.com, our website, but we'd rather have you call 712-722-0023 and talk to any of us. We have 4 brokers here. We'd be glad to try to see what we could do to help you.
All right, folks, if you are interested in a baler like this that you saw running in the commercial that started out Cattle Chatter today, make sure you get in touch with your local John Deere dealer. And of course, thanks to the crew here at John Deere at World Dairy Expo for allowing us to record today's Cattle Chatter. From the World Dairy Expo in Madison, Wisconsin, that's Cattle Chatter.
The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.